begin an exciting panel discussion featuring Cadence Architects, Architecture Paradigm, Kamat and Rozario Architecture on India at 2047, Blueprint to a Regenerative Future. Before we begin, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our valued brand and exhibitor partners, our experienced partner, JSW Dulux, our e-commerce partner, RQ, our gallery partners, Ellie Home, Designment, Kalaspurti, and Studio Nova. We also express our sincere appreciation to our other exhibitor partners whose participation has been integral to this event. Now, as we move forward, it is time to introduce the brilliant minds who have joined us today to share their invaluable insights and expertise. Smaran Malesh, Principal Architect, Cadence Architects. Spearheading design as the co-founder and principal architect of Cadence Architects, Smaran Malesh has over 15 years of experience in architecture and interior design across diverse scales and typologies. Combining his academic experience of teaching at various schools in and around Bangalore with his design work at the studio, Smaran facilitates the integration of the Cadence ethos into the design and delivery process. Smaran lectures frequently and has been a part of various design events in India and abroad. With a focus on design and dialogue and deliberations, Smaran is also responsible for the global and local connection of Cadence to empower the studio's vision of projective practice. Sandeep J, Principal Architect, Architecture Paradigm. Sandeep J is a co-founder of Architecture Paradigm, a Bangalore-based firm established in 1996 with Manoj Ladhad and Vimal Jain. As one of the founders of this widely recognized practice, he has been involved in a wide variety of projects spread across India, ranging from single-family residences to large-scale housing and institutional and public buildings to urban design. He believes in the fact that architecture is about people and their sensitivity to the idea of place. The work of the studio is extensively published in various media, and over the years of practice, it has been recognized with several awards, which include both national and international recommendations. Lester Rozario, Principal Architect, Kamat and Rozario Architecture. Lester Rozario graduated from MSRIT Bangalore with a gold medal in architecture in 2007. He worked with Matthew and Ghosh Architects before teaming up with Smriti Kamat to start Kamat and Rozario Architecture. The firm believes that one cannot stop being an architect at the end of the business day. The act of practicing architecture puts one in a very unique position, where the Venn diagram of aesthetics and architectural tectonics meet that of the appreciation of human nature. The profession has always had a strong hand in steering almost all its choices and decisions. One's work, therefore, is an expression of one's beliefs, and each project is driven by an unrelenting trust in the process of design. Introducing our moderator for today, Chetan Shivaprasad, Director, Principal Architect, CAM Design. With over 26 years of experience, architect Chetan Shivaprasad stands at the intersection of architecture, education, and innovation. He has designed 350 plus buildings, including projects inaugurated by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and has also mentored future architects across India. Through CAM Design and the Humpy Center for Design, he has consistently explored contextual architecture and biomimicry, sharing his insights at institutions such as IIT Chennai. In addition, as the co-founder of Kanasina Mane, an architecture-led turnkey initiative, he is redefining how homes are imagined and delivered, offering a seamless journey from idea to key handover. At the core of his work lies a simple yet powerful belief: design must be sensitive to nature, culture, and the people it serves. Unfortunately, architect Prashant Palaniswamy, Director in Design and Engineering of Good Earth, will not be able to be with us today. However, I'm sure all of you all are looking to this panel discussion. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our speakers onto the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Quite a stuffed room today. Anyways, we're talking about something very interesting. We're moving away from what we generally talk about in terms of ideas of sustainability, but moving more into an idea called regenerative design. And our esteemed panel with me, some of the most successful firms in Bangalore. We have Cadence, we have Paradigm, and we have Kamat Rozario Architects here. And we're really looking at how these firms are really addressing these issues of regenerative design and picking their brains on this. So I'll run through a few questions, and then if time permits, we'll even open it up for a few questions from the audience, right? So I think we've moved away from just being building for spaces, but it has become an idea or a discipline of building what our future lives is all about. And I think the theme of this session is all about looking at where we would be in terms of carbon footprints in the year 2047, 100 years of our independent India. So we are looking at that idea as a concept from ELEV8 conference. And we now start really, with a practice like this, I think we should start really seeing how the nation thinks, feels, and consumes and evolves, especially in the construction industry. This panel unfolds as a powerful journey through the forces reshaping India to 2047, where architecture is no longer confined to buildings, but expand into climate, culture, intelligence, and consciousness. It begins with an urgent carbon reckoning and moves through questions of identity, craft, and global influence. Before entering the age of AI-driven cities and regenerative material systems, at its core lies a deeper inquiry. Can design shift from creating spaces to really shaping our own futures? As India stands at a critical threshold of growth and transformation, this conversation becomes a narrative of responsibility, imagination, and reinvention, where every question points to the kind of world we are choosing to reinvent, rather. So I think let's start out with a brief introduction of the kind of work each firm is doing in terms of really looking at this idea of sustainability or even regenerative design. So can I have some kind of discourse which is happening in your own practices on how you're really looking at regenerative design? Over to you, Smaran.
Hi everybody, it's great to be here on a balmy Saturday afternoon. So I would say that our stance as a studio when it comes to sustainability has always been that sustainability as an idea is necessary but not sufficient to look at what architecture needs to be. Which means we believe that the times that we live in, we started practice about 20 years ago, right? And in the last 20 years, there's a lot happened, and it's happened rapidly. And it was a choice one could make many years ago if you want the practice to be sustainable or not, right? That was not the only thing to chase 20 years ago. You had that option if you wanted to base your practice on as a practice that looks into sustainability, or you wanted it to be an artistic pursuit, or you wanted it to be an sort of thinking at an urban level, so on and so forth. But I think today we don't have a choice. Having said that, like I said, what we believe is that sustainability as an ideology is necessary but not sufficient to make architecture, especially if it is driven by code. So it is not necessary, or no, it's not important, or it's just not sufficient if you just tick off things that are required to get a certification, but it needs to go beyond that. And funnily enough, it needs to go beyond that and when you look at it, you have to look at it from the lens of making good architecture, like you always have, and they're not two parallel tracks, and then you try and make sense of how these two can come together to formulate a practice that looks at sustainability in a conscientious way. So we look at sustainability as design in a conscientious way, where we want to produce architecture or make architecture that is conscious of what it does to the environment and how it's contributing both negatively and positively. But look at it through the lens of how you would look at conventional architecture in terms of how you've learned it to make it well. So the pursuit more and more in office has now been to see how you can combine the two. And over the years, we've also started being more interested in the ideas of longevity, which maybe we weren't very interested in when we just first started. So how buildings age, what kind of materials we look at, and just materiality as an ideology, I think is something that's crept in more seriously now into our practice than it ever did before. And I think that kind of leans on sustainability also as a reason for it. So that's where we are with it.
Yeah, again, it's fantastic to kind of see the crowd occupying a facility that was direly underused, like it was. So I would like to kind of make a point from the standpoint of this building itself, like as a practice, it kind of embodies the approach, it is, I think you can't segregate sustainability from architecture. And it is only that now we are talking about in a sort of stylistic or relatively a definitive kind of focused way. But I think sustainability was an integral part of architecture, and to not be an integral part of architecture is you're taking a kind of a risk, I would say, considering how things move, and we are not sitting on infinite resources. So you have to kind of look at how you deal with this finite kind of situation. The this project is interesting for me from the standpoint that a totally underused building, which was a vital part of the fabric of the city, and it's something that I have seen growing up and have been a part of in terms of painting competitions or exhibitions, to come back and look at it in a new way and saying that, yes, this could be a place. So placemaking is integral. Sustainability is not about as much about making a building as much as it is about repairing what you do around as well. So it cannot just be about construction of a structure. It's about the space that you don't build, and how you kind of work with that to create a place that transcends, like what Smaran was talking about. So it's not about number game. It's about actually creating a space that you can relate to and belong to, and you would want to come back to that space. So sustainability is integral is my take on this whole thing. Yeah.
I think for us, so I think when we started off, so it was a very, I mean, we're not a very big practice even now, but so when we started off, I think sustainability for us was more a need because we had clients with really tight budgets. So, so I mean, so being sustainable was the way forward, and we try to stretch budgets and, make those things work. So that led to a lot of, directions that, I mean, now if I look back at it, were sustainable as such. And I think later for us, during COVID, this really hit us that, I think what we're doing, maybe we need to look at it a little harder in terms of the, the materiality as such. So then after that, I think right now, like, I mean, we made it a conscious decision to like build with earth block and things like that. But I mean, we didn't want to confer with the aesthetic that, normally comes with it. So, I mean, what we've tried to do is at least wherever possible be as sustainable as you can, but don't stick to the general aesthetic that comes with it. So that's what it.
Yeah. Interesting. I think we had Smaran really talking about sustainability as longevity, and we're talking about what it does to the not just the built form, but what happens to the city as a whole. And I think as an young practice, how sustainability became a need. But I think I'll move into another very interesting question, which is very specific to materiality, and really try and understand what materiality in your practices are really supportive of. I'm not really looking at sustainability only in terms of mud construction or rammed earth or CSCB construction, but the choice of materials and the choice of the impact it has in terms of its inherent energy or the kind of energy it puts back into the system. What is that things your practices are doing So to really look at material.
I think the one material or non-material that we are extremely partial to is landscape and greenery. So for us, almost all projects, irrespective of the scale, if it's architecture, there is always an attempt to create like an ecosystem that kind of sort of substantiates a certain idea of wellness so that one feels good. So a sustainable way of living and this idea of well-being sort of cushioned, or this sort of juxtaposition of green in any form, any scale, any extent, is something that we really look at. The architectural expression of that connection we made with landscape varies from project to project. So I think off late we are more interested in looking at stone that is more locally available as something that we could look at using in different ways to make this sort of connection between inside and outside. But otherwise, the one material that we really depend on for this sort of our way of looking at sustainability has to be this idea of landscape and the edge that sort of meets it.
Okay. So materially, I think so we are all exposed to certain noble materials, as I would want to call it. You have brick, you have say steel, you have iron, and you have wood, and these are materials. Why it's called, from at least from my point of view, as a noble thing, is that it's seen time. It's seen time, and you know the origins of the material. You know how it can be. It is not just about the material per se, it's also about the emotional attachment that you have, relationship with the ground. For example, most of these are coming from the earth. So it kind of connected. So we love these materials, and most of our work is revolving around this. Use of concrete, of course, yes. Like Smaran previously spoke about aging of buildings. That is one thing that we are interested in as well, because I think architecture is about telling time as well, as much as it's about photographs that people are obsessed with. It's about how home becomes a home. It's not instantly a home when you give it. We always tell our clients that it's our space, and you make it your space over time. So it takes time, but today's culture, I feel, is caught up in this whole idea of instant homes. So that is one thing. But today there is the other side to the picture as well, where materials are, you don't know the origins. They are mutant materials, fundamentally. They are made in ways that we don't understand. They're made to mimic certain materials. So that is, I feel, a new challenge in a way. And that is where temporal comes into play. That's where the idea of impermanence comes into play. That's where time is tested in a different way. So use of materials for us has been something very integral. Like the idea of material also leads to this thing about detailing. How does one detail? How does two different kind of material come together? How do they meet? So that has been, I think, a direction that office took very early. And if you see most of our earlier works, there was this conscious attempt to express materials for what they are. So I feel that dealing with today's materials and yesteryears, or what we call as the more familiar ones, I think that is where the practice stands today, and we are not disregarding what's happening today in the context of how wastage can be understood, in terms of a project and what comes out. So industrialization versus crafting a building, right? So these are areas in which we would want to operate.
So in terms of materiality, I think we've always gone with materials that, are, kind of timeless, and so stone and, it's just, I'm being very literal here, I think, in terms of what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, so basically natural materials is what we generally look at.
Yeah. In terms of the new approach which we're really talking about, especially in terms of really looking at material, not in the idea of sustainability, but something which starts looking at regenerative as doing something positive to the environment, rather than just being something which impacts the environment. Is there thought processes on that in terms of saying, is there a material which I'm looking at as a very new material which works on, I mean, if I'm looking at a very odd idea of this is how you can start looking at solar as a facade material, right? But is there any such materials or any such attempts in your practices where you start looking at an expression of regeneration back to the system? I'm still looking at buildings. I get into large scale a little later, but in terms of buildings, is there any attempts like that where there are people who are working with fungi-based structures, things like that? Is there any attempts in your practices?
It is, I think for us, it is more the idea of process. First thing, I think one important thing that I perhaps didn't talk about initially is the fact that when we look at sustainability, it's very important to exercise the idea of restraint as well. You know, like how does one read the land? You build less on less in a way. So that itself brings about a sense of how much you want to do in a particular place. So in terms of the new materials that you're talking about, and for me it is a kind of an incidental opportunity. If there are, like I think we somehow as a practice over the last 30 years, we kind of have moved towards the familiarity of materials as the governing essence of a project. And we look at innovation, yes, of course. And this radical new experimental materials, I think will feature, unless, see, the thing is, it needs to be tested, all these new materials. It is, we talk about permanence as well. We talk about architecture being a certain way, and it needs to see time. So the idea of that quality materials will, many of the new materials we've tried many composite materials in our projects, where the origins we still understand. Like you find wood composites today, you find resin-based wood composites. So you know the origins and how the waste is being considered as an element in this whole manufacturing process. But we still need to see the time. We have seen it. We've seen some of the materials. Some we are not happy with. Some we are. So it is about that. Getting accustomed to. We are open is what I want to say. That. Yeah.
So Sandeep, this choice of palette, that is. Let's say that is something cultivated over a period of time that you choose to operate with, is more for its technical sort of tectonic longevity results that have been proven, or more for the emotional content that they sort of inherently carry? Which one of the two is it? What is more in terms of what weighs more in the project?
I think, see, the thing for me, see, architecture like today, I feel I'm happy to go back to many of the structures that we have built, right? I mean, today I see some of the buildings and I feel it's still relevant. And that is coming from a place because you have kind of connected with that space at an emotional level as well, not just the materiality as well. As a means. Material is just fundamentally about enabling space making, and space making is about transcending experience. So it's about elevating the way you kind of look at it. For me, that becomes at the idea of at the time of construction, I think it's about the material. When we are finishing, it's an idea of experience. So it changes, I think, but I would wait equally.
Any comments on? Yeah.
So I think in terms of materiality, we try to work with, like, I mean, with the regular elements, like, if we could use them in a different way, like, if a stone instead of just being a facade, what it could be, like, it could be like maybe a form of a jali, or or a porous medium. So I mean, that is one of the things that we try to look at, reinventing whatever's already out there and see how we could stretch it or make it work beyond what it has been, like, subjected to. In terms of also new materials, I think there's a lot of it out there. I mean, just one thing that comes to mind right now is this board that they're making with rice husk, like the waste. So we're trying to, like, look at that in a particular project. Not use it as yet, but as Sandeep said, a lot of these materials have not stood the test of time, so we don't know how they'll perform in the long run. But I mean, you have to give it a chance, I guess.
I think, but again, a small dialogue there in terms of saying, is longevity a very critical element of architecture today? With the kind of language you're following in our other aspects of life, is longevity even an element to be practiced? Is something to just dialogue on. But I think taking this a little beyond, I think a lot of you have done projects not just at a residential level, but projects which impact the city as a whole, projects which impact more number of people than just a family. And how do you see those practices working with this idea of impacting the city as a whole? Any particular project of yours and how you've really looked at it?
Unlike Sandeep's practice, we haven't done anything to that scale that often and that many. But one of the larger projects we've done is sort of a library in a campus, which is a large campus. It's an urban campus, so there are a lot of people moving around. And the idea of the building was always to build a piece of the campus more than making architecture. In the sense, the idea of the ground was very important for us. And rather than looking at the building or looking at architecture as a building on a ground plane, the idea was to see how we could manipulate the ground plane itself so that we can we can sort of blur this distinction between figure and ground, right? It's not the idea about building being on land, but you make that distinction fuzzy. You manipulate the ground in such a way that it sort of extends to the rest of the campus. And for us over here, I mean, the campus essentially is about connecting students to academia in some sense. And this library project sort of sat on a site that connected the hostels to the rest of the campus. And the site itself was a path that the students would take. And the master plan also enabled a large plaza right in front of this library. So the idea was to see how we could develop this piece of architecture as manipulation of the ground, adding to the campus in a way where, like, politically the building becomes very democratic and starts belonging to the students. So once architecture is not like a power symbol where there is this idea of hierarchy, but becomes part of the ground, which is very democratic and free, it completely changes the dynamics of it. So the idea of sustainability there, from a student's perspective, is to give them ownership of the place, right? So we looked at this building in a way where we also added more program to these layers of earth that we then sort of peeled off. And then we put in program that is accessible to the students throughout the day. And then the library itself only started at a upper level, a higher level, in such a way that most of this belonged to the campus. So I think in that sense, we looked at this larger piece of architecture as something that builds a small part of the city and sort of affects, right? So that's what we did. Yeah.
Sandeep, you've done quite a bit of urban level projects.
I mean, we've been lucky enough in that sense that we've some of the projects that we took interest, pure urban. Few of them were done pro bono in a way that we wanted to test our own capability in terms of reading landscapes. That I would say is fundamental to look at a large project. So if you are looking at the bigger picture, it's always, I think architecture is it's not like when you're working on a painting, for example, like let's say you're making a miniature art, you're working very closely, right? And for you, you're looking at extreme closeness, and the big picture is revealed only when you step back, when you go back and you see it. So it is about architecture is like that, I feel, and you can't segregate it from the city. And be it big or small, be it a house or be it a campus or be it a building like this or an institution or any kind of public thing, I think it has to find a way of integrating with the city. So idea of publicness becomes very important in any project. So even in houses, we're talking about public spaces. We're talking about segregation of spaces or hierarchy of spaces. In public buildings, it is far more apparent in the sense that you would look at a plane that is purely accessible, purely public, and it allows freedom of entry and exit. So it is not as controlled in a way, in that sense. It is made accessible. So the idea of building this sense of belonging or bringing an identity, like Smaran spoke about the library, changing the dynamic of the campus. It's about changing, your architecture can be provocative. It can be a thing that instigates change for the better. I think city like Bangalore really needs that kind of change. You really need to push that. And happy that something like this got picked by a state government, this thing project got picked by a corporate house as a CSR initiative. I mean, that is the direction that the city needs to take into publicness. Make it accessible, make it a part of the city. Right now, I mean, you're looking at a very, very low this thing, or if you look at the percentage of civic space accessibility per person in a city like Bangalore, it is marginal. It's like around 5%, 6%, of the total population have access to spaces. So that is important in that context. I feel that it's important to make your buildings talk about the context, irrespective of that.
Anything, Lester?
So, I mean, we've done a couple of projects on, I mean, not on Sandeep scale, of course. We did, a school in a rural setting in close. Yeah, so they had this issue of this dust storms and all this. So we had to create like a screen wall. And what happened was that when parents started coming to drop their children to school, and this kind of became like almost like a for the village, this became like a central space. So people used to come in, and for the evening, they used to come for the evening walks to walk in front of the in the campus. Then it also became, I mean, for a wedding, they started using that as a backdrop. So it kind of became like it kind of became a public space for that village or that community over there. That was one. The other one was we've done an apartment in Cooktown. Over there, so we decided, I mean, and the client was very receptive to this. Normally, you close your building off and you have like a restricted entry and exit. But for this, what we did was we almost, I mean, it's not a very big apartment, but we left the front edge of the building open to public. So we've created like a small little park garden kind of thing. I mean, it's almost like a bench for people who are going for a walk up to the park, which is ahead. They can come and stop there, sit there, hang around. So that was a little bit that we tried, and I mean it's working to some extent right now because I live very close to it. So we've been observing whether people are actually using it or not. So yeah, that's happening. So that's the other thing that we've tried.
Thanks. Yeah, I think now going a little beyond, I think let's start looking at where the future is leading towards, because I think the kind of impact which is happening in terms of urban inflow in Bangalore, we know has grown multifold from where we were 20 years ago. We're almost 4 times the area of urbanization, and definitely that's reducing a lot of our green cover, and the kind of heat inside the city is building up, right? So where do you see the journey of architects, not just as somebody who's designing their own personal goals, their own personal philosophies, but as an impact to the city as a whole? And where do you see, do you see that there's going to be a change in the way practices are going to run in the coming years, so that we at least keep it sane enough for people people who live in an urban space? So what do you see as a path architectural practices should take?
Um, I completely agree with what Sandeep was saying, where, regardless of the scale of projects, I think practices need to start thinking about most of these things more holistically, right? In terms of regardless of what you're contributing something to the city. And I think, although one has to be realistic in terms of whatever's happening with climate. I think architecture is a part of it, but it's not everything. We are contributors, but we are not the sole contributors for everything that's happening. And for real change to happen, there are many stakeholders, right? It's not just the architects, and it needs to be a sort of a conscientious ecosystem that then does something together, whether that's the government, whether that's whether it's the builders, the clients, architects as a community. They all have to come together to do something to kind of fix things. You could do something in a silo while you set an example and you're doing the right thing, but for it to happen at a national level, I think it needs a lot more participation, momentum, and agreement of sorts for everybody to come together.
A lot of collaborations is what you're saying.
100%. Because you can't bear the weight of everything and do something through your practice. Yes, you have to do it, consciously, but I think for change to happen, it has to be a lot more collaborative. Maybe it has to be policy driven. Maybe there have to be stricter norms, just like how you have guidelines and you have rules and you have, maybe it needs to go to that extent to get everybody to do it. And it's so strange, right? I always wonder, the same set of people who will visit a bus stand will behave very differently when they visit an airport. The same set of people will behave really well. They look for a dustbin, they'll whisper, they'll do all of those things. And when they go to the bus stand, they'll throw that banana peel there, and they'll throw the chocolate wrapper there. So I think it's got to do with conditioning. It's got to do with how collectively you take conscious decisions of how you want to kind of conduct yourself. I think that's very important.
Anybody else? Would you like to?
Okay. We've been going in a sequence. So the one thing about reading, landscapes, it's fundamental to doing anything in the city, understanding that it is a system, and working with nature in a way is about respecting that what exists. So the way Bangalore is turning out, you can imagine what it started out as. Okay, it had started out as this, a small fortification, and the contrast to the other side was the cantonment or the British settlement that was there. Both followed a different way of spatial occupation. But one thing that both these guys did well was reading the landscape, which was central to their survival in a way. So how the water systems work, how everything worked. So I'm not talking about going back in terms of innocence, but it is about recognizing these things, these things that have underpinned our context. So it is important to kind of recognize this and then use that as a means to kind of address the city. and recognizing the same potential within each of the silos that we end up working in, though we would love to repair things outside the boundaries. Sometimes it's not possible, but like what he was talking about, Smaran was talking about, it's about provoking. It's about saying that you see that this can be done. And most of the things is fragmented in a way, like, how we use landscape also today. It is used as a beautifying element or an element that is added to soften, so to speak. It is not integral to the life, So it is about understanding these smaller nuances that would change the way we look at, how work is seen, how work needs to be done.
I think we anyway, like a lot of us end up working in silos. Yeah, it's important to engage. I mean, as an architect, of course, it's important for us to educate our clients and see, how that goes. But it's also, I think, important to engage with the city, which is very difficult to do. But I think, yeah, there needs to be a collaborative effort to do that. Somebody has to take a step somewhere on that.
Yeah, I'll get to a very interesting part where the future we see as moving more towards AI-driven data points, and also at one level we are talking about AI-driven data points for our practice also. The second one is also about the kind of waste each of our construction systems are creating, right? So how do you see that AI and this problem can be addressed? Because if I'm really talking about regenerative architecture in the near future, we are also talking about how are we handling our own waste, because we generate close to around 40% of the carbon emissions as an industry. So how do you see AI impacting this kind of thing in our practices? Lester, would you like to speak?
Yeah. Okay, if you're looking at the theme, I don't see we are there as yet, but maybe at 47 we would. AI, of course, right from a design, stage when you're, putting your, designing a structure, like the optimization of maybe a wall, maybe the way your tiles are laid, AI could probably tell you that, if it's done in a particular way, you're obviously reducing the amount of wastage you're generating. And that obviously gives you better insights into, designing the structure better. Beyond that, of course, at site in terms of the materials, like when materials are required, AI could probably, could probably connect a web of local vendors and things like that, get your materials in place. So that also helps in, reducing your timelines, making it more efficient.
Okay, I'd like to set a premise. Okay, so this I want to take you guys back to 1950s. There was a bunch of these guys called situationists. They called their group situationists somewhere in Europe, I think, and they were the ones whose aim was to criticize capitalism. Okay. And the outcome of capitalism is fundamentally technology. You invest in technology, make your things efficient. At the same time, you're manufacturing alienation, right? You're creating the distance from things. So, it is and also we are so dependent on objects. When I say objects, it could mean even software, right? So that we use to enhance our social relations, our connections. So it is that space between man and nature, which has been the perennial question mark, like the fact that we see ourselves being of nature, but at the same time, you're not a part of it as well. And that has created the premise for modern architecture as well. So that space between nature and man is occupied by technology. And we are thinking that technology is going to enhance our connections there. That I think unless you kind of learn to critique AI and understand its limitations in terms of how it is a teleological tool. It is not something that understands causation, right? It is not ontological, like how we as humans work on it, right? So it is important to kind of look at AI with a element of criticism. And I'm not discounting, and it's made many of our lives easier. Well, I will say that as well. But it's also about exercising something that we as humans, in terms of experience, are capable, which the AI currently is not yet there.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Sandeep's saying, and I also think that one needs to look at this not just about efficiency of material, of waste, of all the, in that sense, non-living things, but there are people, there are so many things that are also involved. Yes, so theoretically, there's AI, there's robotics, there'll be zero wastage. But I'm saying there are people, there is craft, there is so much of knowledge that we've gained through time. What happens to all of that? How do you sort of reconcile all of this? So I think one shouldn't just put that to the sacrificial sort of altar at the on the behest of trying to save every single piece of material or waste or whatever it is. I think this will only unfold over time. I think AI also changes so rapidly. But I am on the side of Sandeep. I look at it more skeptically. I am more worried about it than thinking that it's great, it's here. I don't know where it will take us, what it will do. But theoretically, it should solve a lot of things. But potentially, I also see a lot of sort of complications, the baggage it carries along with it. So that's my stance on it.
I think I would like to close this with a one-word answer from all of you and then open it up for some questions from the audience. Purely with respect to the topic which we have, which is India at 2047, blueprint to a regenerative future. So what does India at 2047 look like if net zero is never achieved? Economic and ecological collapse, or a society reshaped by climate-driven disruption? Can you give me an answer in one word?
I don't think we have a choice. It'll be mayhem, It'll be like snafu, situation normal, all fucked up.
You better have a escape plan, like. So the thing about these things is, if there is a calamity like that, the people who are going to survive are not the urbanites. It is somebody living in the forest, right? So that is where the challenges are. You can't ignore it.
I guess, we as Indians are very resilient. We, learn to find a way around. So maybe we'll find a way. Yeah.
I think, okay. Any questions from the audience, please? You have one there. Can somebody help them with the mic? Yeah.
Thank you for a wonderful session. Is it okay if I have two? Yes.
Your name and...
Okay, so my name is Sanket. I'm not from here. I'm from Nagpur. I run a younger firm, comparatively all yours. So, yes, although you all look a lot younger than I am looking right now. Okay, so as a young firm, we are trying to understand which way to take in. So you said that it's a necessity now, sustainability. Like Glenn Murcutt has a way to think that let's keep the load lighter on the earth. So his firm has gotten a philosophy now. You saying it's a necessity, have you, all of you, can your philosophy of your studio be reduced down to a singular line like Murcutt has, about Glenn Murcutt has? And can I also ask the second question? So about longevity, I just have it could feel like a very dumb question, but to me it feels like there are two routes in front of us. Either build for 200 years, we also call that as sustainability, like a lot of stone construction and all that. I visited a house in Pune where the architect has tried to build it for 300 years, and all the infills can be changed by every generations. So the basic structure remains. and he calls that sustainability. And I met another guy who said, but what if the taste changes with each generation? So why not build only for that one particular generation and let the other next generation choose something else? So if there was a binary choice between these two approaches, which one would you take?
I like to answer that very simply, in the sense that it's about relevance. Like I think you'll have to attach that word in terms of it's not about the magnitude you're building or the material you're building with. It is about how relevant it is, or why would you want to save that building for another 200 years? Like this has a memory in people's hearts, right? Many of the artists relate to this. Few of them are around, I think, but for them, it was the only representation that they had in terms of whole of Karnataka. This is meant for the artists of Karnataka. It's not a privately owned gallery. So it meant something. The building was not great. It was not, something that could, initial proposition would be to break it down and rebuild it, right? But they didn't want to break it down. So it is about relevance, whether it means something to them. And that is when you kind of look at it. And coming to building lightly, I think it is like I made that point about building less on less. And how do you kind of negotiate with your clients? How do you work with your clients to convince them as to not overdo things? That is the first step, I think, like understanding the program and defining and having this conversation. It's a tough conversation, I know, because it's also about bread and butter at the end of the day. So it's a tough conversation, but it is also your consciousness, like that, are you out there to kind of make a difference in terms of that? Yeah.
I just want to say, as a young practice, first you have to figure out how to make your practice sustainable.
Anybody else? Anyone else has a question? Yeah.
Hi, so I'm familiar with all of your work. And what I want to ask is, when we're looking at this regenerative future, all of you have to design not just for yourselves or for your firm or to establish identity, but it is a service to your client and your consumer. So when you talk about sustainability and all of that, so the first things that we know is local is kind of sustainable, making use of what you already have so that you reduce the pressure on the load of, whatever else, all these other factors. So when you have clients who have this once in a lifetime opportunity to build a residence, which has to be a mammoth, it has to be a legacy that you leave behind for your future generations. At that point of time, how relevant are those conversations of local sustainability and regenerative future? Because are these people making houses for the next foreseeable 30 years as they used to be, or is it just like a piece of art? And then how relevant is your local material, and how is it speaking? Is your identity compromised? And are you a hypocrite because you're using, in quotes, global materials, which are then impacting the sustainability factor of your buildings?
Yeah, Sandeep.
I'm going to use an analogy. So I'll be honest here. So let's say you're a chef and you're interested in food. The greatest chefs in the world are not interested in eliminating hunger, but they're trying to push the boundaries of food, right? So I'm saying that this idea of sustainability and wanting to be, and you have to believe me when I say this, when there is a client who walks in, conversations are on these lines, but sometimes it's very difficult to push it down their throat. It is not a sustainable idea. You will lose the client. So I think it's smart to kind of pick your battles. And sometimes it makes sense to lose some battles to win the war. I mean, that's the way we look at our practice. Not every project we do is 100% sustainable, that it would get a rating or it would get Griha or any of those things. But what I can say is that is something that we would like to do. Now, do we sacrifice an entire practice looking for only such projects, and are we extremely ethical in that sense in doing it? We are not, because we are also interested in a lot of other things, like how chefs in the world are interested in a lot of things and not just to eliminate hunger. So I think we are a practice that would like to dabble in multiple things, but we would like to be sustainable. That's the way I look at what our office does. You have to go back home with her. So I can fib, but you have to be honest.
So, I mean, see, I had something in mind, but I don't know. I just lost the train of thought, right? So, I'll. No, no, no. It's just that. See, see, it's always about the act of negotiation, right? Any project for that, if your, intent is in the right place, if your efforts are towards a certain direction, how much of it you have to let go. This is something that one of my mentors earlier taught me, was that, you have to hold few things close to your heart in terms of designing. And that should stay no matter what. And you have to learn to let go of few things to gain what is possible. Yeah. And through that. So, and it's about holding those things which are central, and those things that kind of, so it's about relevance, that I want to repeat this word again. So it's maybe 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years down the line, when a home is handed down to the next generation, they should still feel connected. It's about developing that kind of connection with the house itself. It's hard to let go of it. The memories that you make there, growing up in a house, it still kind of influences the person who you are. Living a part of your life elsewhere, in terms of engaging with land and also the building simultaneously. So it's about that, I feel, and that is what leads to this idea of making appropriate kind of architecture. You want to add?
I think I'll probably go back to his analogy. So, okay, a chef, I mean, as a chef, I would probably, try and work with a local, local ingredients and see if that works. And if not, then of course, try the regular ingredients, present both and see if that, flies.
Yeah, for me, I think I definitely would love to see a building, one of my buildings, decompose before I die. So honestly, decompose becomes a food for another cycle, and that's something I'm really exploring in the kind of materials we've been working with, and we've been exploring new materials to really see whether that can happen. So yeah, I stay in a 100-year-old house which was built by my great grandfather. So legacy has passed down. But definitely the journey for me, because of the kind of clients we have right now, is to see that it works for a generation, and if it makes sense for them, they readapt it to a next generation. But otherwise, it needs to change. So I need to know what happens to those materials when it needs to change, and it does not just end in a landfill. Anybody else? I think the last question. We can take one more question. Yeah. The mic there.
Hello, sir. There are also a lot of students here who are attending this event. What would you insist students? Hello, am I audible? There are also a lot of students here attending this event. What would you insist them to focus on or develop before getting into the field?
I mean, it is observation fundamentally. You see, the thing about training is you can lead somebody to the water. Fundamentally, you can't teach them to drink it, right? And it's about exercising your skills to read things, read into things between the lines. fundamentally. That is the thing about how you. I would like to give the example of our own practice. We started right after college, and circumstances were good enough for us to kind of venture into it. So we didn't have prior training of working in other practices or learning the ropes. So it's about reinventing every step of what a practice needs to be or how it needs to be looked at. So it's about understanding that. Today, I think much of the culture is spoon-fed, and there is a formulaic way of approaching things, which I would discourage. And spend some time in a practice, move around, see the world before you actually set up. See the world in terms of how people, what are the things, the culture of the space, and how things work, and learn about these things. And then I think you should look at working on, or getting into it is the other way, jumping into the deep end and learning to swim as well. And that's what we did, right?
I just have this was very deep and philosophical. The easiest one and the one that you have to do is learn drawing. Well, really, because I'm saying that, and it just sounds very simplistic, drawing, but I think if you can learn how to draw, it means a lot. And that is something that more and more with every passing year, students cannot do. And when you don't draw, and especially because we like back in the day, we were the last sort of batch, at least in Bangalore, that went through the hand drawing for 5 years, doing our thesis by hand kind of a thing. So the most important thing about drawing is that there is a tactile connection to what you're imagining as a material and your hand weight and the way you draw it and the way you feel it. So drawing, you have to remember, as architects, we're not sculptors. We don't go and do the real thing. We give a set of instructions for it to be built. How? Through the act of drawing. So whether you sketch and where you draw something from what you observe, or you draw to give a set of instructions, or you draw to communicate, or you draw to represent, everything is through drawing. So the one thing all students here need to be very well equipped with is the act of drawing. That is extremely important. That is the first step to everything else. That's what I would say.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Smaran, Sandeep, and Lester for this wonderful session. Thank you, audience.
Thank you to all our panelists. To mark this moment, I would like to invite architect Ashiti to felicitate our panelists. Following this, we will have our next session, a keynote by architect Vinu Daniel.